Good morning. Happy Monday morning. I'm not normally with y'all for a coffee with the preacher on Monday mornings, but being as tomorrow is election day, figured I'd do a special edition of Coffee with the Preacher, talking politics, and no, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. Y'all are smart enough to figure that out on your own, I suppose. I'll preface this, if I make anybody mad, that's all right. As long as I make people mad, both on the right and the left, I guess I'm good. One more thing that I will mention, if you haven't seen it, take a few minutes. It'll actually take about an hour and a half, and watch the Netflix documentary called Social Dilemma. The Social Dilemma. It is powerful. It is powerful, and it exposes and explains a lot about the role of social media and in particular Facebook in shaping American beliefs and what we say and think about each other. I suppose I may be put in Facebook jail for talking about this on Facebook, but it is well worth the time, even though it's about an hour and a half long. Well, tomorrow is election day. I know a lot of you may have already voted. I have not. I'll go do my civic duty first thing in the morning. But I wanted to take a few minutes today and just talk about principles. I will confess that the last several years I've gotten really disenchanted with politics, disillusioned, if you will. I've always been interested in politics, but I feel like that our whole level of political discourse has really gotten a lot coarser over the last several years, and we are far too divided than we ought to be or should be. So I wanted to toss out just some principles. And you can take these for what it's worth. John Wesley, in 1738, in a letter wrote 3 principles for voting. And I think that they're just as applicable now in 2020 as they were now in nearly 300 years ago. Here's what Wesley said about voting. He said, "Vote without fee or reward for the person judged most worthy." That's the first one. Vote without fee or reward for the person judged most worthy. The second is, speak no evil of the person you vote against. Speak no evil of the person you vote against. And number 3, take care that your spirits aren't sharpened against those that voted on the other side. Wow. The first one I think we can handle pretty well. Speak no evil of the person you vote against. We don't do well with that. Take care that your spirits aren't sharpened against those who vote on the other side. I know we don't do well with that. And this cuts both ways. And Wesley's 3 rules for voting. I'll summarize them again. Vote without fee or reward for the person you judge most worthy. Speak no evil of the person you vote against. And take care that your spirits aren't sharpened against people who voted for the other side. So as I think about our society, our culture, and the divisiveness, not just divisiveness, but just bitterness that we see on social media, and in particular, there are just several things that I just needed to sort of get off my chest. It's been gnawing at me for a while. We should not, as Christians, we should not question the faith of people who vote differently from us. We can't do that. If you are a bleeding heart liberal, that's fine, but you can't question the faith of conservatives. if you're very conservative, you can't question the faith of your liberal neighbor. It doesn't work. The kingdom is big enough to have both liberals and conservatives. And speaking of how big the kingdom is, have you ever thought about this? In the original 12 disciples, Jesus calls his 12 disciples, and if you read the list of names, you'll come across two people who ordinarily wouldn't have been very close to each other. There was Simon the Zealot. The Zealots were a party that were ready to take up the sword to overthrow Rome. And within the same 12 disciples, there's Matthew the tax collector, who was actively collaborating with Rome collecting their taxes. Simon the Zealot, Matthew the tax collector, figured out how to live together following the master. And I believe that we Republicans and Democrats can figure out how to do the same thing now. If Simon the Zealot and Matthew the tax collector could do it then, we can do it now. Also, when we vote and when we consider political issues, think about big picture biblical principles. And big picture biblical principles can equate to policies of different sorts. So big picture biblical principles, I think about life. The value of human life is probably the first one I think of. Concern for the poor. The Bible talks repeatedly, but particularly in the Old Testament and the law, about looking after the widow, the orphans, and the aliens in your midst. Those are overarching biblical principles. And if you have a real issue with any of those biblical principles, then, well, you may need to read your Bible more. That's just me being blunt. If you have heartburn with those, read your Bible more. That's not left or right, Republican or Democrat, that's Christian. But how those principles get played out into legislation can vary. Some people, out of concern for the poor, favor a much higher minimum wage, say doubling the minimum wage. But you can also make a very good economic argument that wouldn't be effective. And that's a biblical principle. And then beyond that is, how do you play that out into legislation? Because in my case personally, I have a real problem with state lotteries, because to me personally, I consider that to be a tax on the poor. Others may disagree with me on that, but that's how I feel personally. The Bible doesn't say specifically about this legislation or that a lot of times, but it gives us the principles, and then it's up to us to rationally discuss the best way, the best policies, the best legislation to carry that out. Something else, and it really bothers me, is the level of animosity. The level of animosity that I see between people of good faith on social media. I'm not on other social media platforms besides Facebook, but what I see on Facebook is disgusting. I see people on Facebook yelling at each other, yet if they met face to face, would give each other the shirt off their back. And we're better than that. We got to be better than that. That's just all there is to it. We have got to be better than that. Don't say something on Facebook that you wouldn't say to somebody face to face. We got to be grown-ups. We got to show charity. Um, a lot of times we let our political enemies live, as they say, rent free in our head. I love that expression. If you haven't heard it, we let somebody live rent free in our head, meaning we spend every waking moment obsessed with this person or that person. So here's an example. You wake up every morning and you check your phone to see what President Trump has said or done overnight that's going to set you off. He's living rent free in your head. On the other side, if you get up every morning and you look to see what Speaker Pelosi has said, or Chuck Schumer or Joe Biden have done overnight that's going to make you mad, they're living rent free in your head. Life is too short. Life is too short to let people that you disagree with live rent free in your head. If you ride down the road, and okay, if you're a diehard Trump supporter, that's fine. That's your right. That's fine. I'm not going to speak ill of you at all. But if you see a Biden sign in somebody's yard, don't think that they're a communist. Don't think ill of them because of the Biden sign. And if you're a Democrat, don't think ill of your neighbor who's got a Trump sign in the front yard. It doesn't work. You see a Trump sign in front of a business, don't decide that you're not going to go in there because of who they support for president, and vice versa. We've got to be able to live together. We as a society have got to be able to live together and converse with each other without yelling. We've got to be able to live together and converse with each other without yelling, listening to each other. I'm going to close out this morning with words from somebody who's smarter than me. These are the closing words from Lincoln's second inaugural address. Lincoln gave his second inaugural address in early March of 1865, and tragically he was assassinated. He was murdered just a month later, just over a month later. And American history would have been quite different, I think, if Lincoln had not been murdered. An awful lot of the pain of Reconstruction in the South after the war and race relations would have been much better if he had not been murdered. Here's what Lincoln said. And to close his second inaugural address, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness to see the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind the nation's wounds, to care for those who have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations, with malice toward none and with charity for all. Go vote tomorrow. If you haven't already done so, go vote tomorrow. But be thinking, with malice toward none, with charity for all. Your vote tomorrow is not a holy crusade. It's an exercise in civic duty and civic responsibility in Republican government, small r Republican government. That's what it is. This is not a holy war against the infidel. It is an exercise in civic duty and Republican government. And let us vote and accept with equanimity whatever happens, good or ill, giving the benefit of the doubt to the people that you vote against, even though you may disagree with them, and that's fine. The person who won still won. Now, I hope y'all have a great rest of your Monday, and that you would pray for our nation, pray for its elected leaders at all levels of government, and pray for our society, that we can grow to live with each other and listen to each other and love each other. Have a great Monday, and I will be back on Wednesday morning at 9:30. Have a good one.